Hello again and welcome to another 140k Mordian Glory video, and today guys I would like to say a huge thank you to Colton Berry for sending in some awesome pictures of his scions. They look absolutely fantastic. I love the way the grey and black and green really go well together, and the name of them is really cool. The Drukhari Phantoms, absolutely fantastic. So thank you for sending these pictures in, Colton. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Now today guys, we are going to be doing an after action report for the first couple of battles that I have had of 9th edition. So in case you haven't seen it already, there is a battle report that's gone up on my channel yesterday. It's my first 9th edition one. It's my Mordian 50th Rifles versus Johnny from Schola Progenium, his witch cult. And then I also had another battle on his channel, so if you haven't seen that, go and check it out, where my Black Templars take on his Blood Angels. And so they were my first couple of games of 9th, played them both in one weekend, really intense. Probably did about 15 hours of recording and then another sort of 5 hours of editing and everything, because I put them both together. And so done a lot of intensive, almost like crash course of 9th edition. And so I've got some really good feedback and first impressions from not only those games, but from the edition in general. Now it goes without saying guys that there are going to be spoilers in this video. I am going to talk about the results from both the Guard game and the Black Templar game. So if you haven't seen them already, please go and watch those battle reports first, otherwise you'll spoil the results for you. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give some first impressions of the edition, and I'm also going to say where I feel Guard fall in the pecking order, and some general strengths and weaknesses of Guard in 9th edition. I will be doing a more in-depth video on Guard in 9th, which should be going up tomorrow. After this one, I'm trying to do a video every single day. If it's not tomorrow, it'll be up later during the week. So, first game, 9th edition, Pure Infantry Guard versus Witch Cult. I have to say that straight off the bat, the game is not quicker, guys. The game is not quicker. And it's simply because of the terrain rules. Okay, me and Johnny spended about 20 minutes trying to work out what the terrain should be to make the game balanced for both sides, because if we had obscuring in the middle, it was too beneficial for the Dark Elder, because they could move up, and because of the smaller board sizes, they could move up to the obscuring terrain. I wouldn't be able to see them at all, and even if they went second, they could basically get an unchallenged charge off on the guard, and I wouldn't be able to do any damage to them. And I had mortars and stuff. I had some indirect fire, but yeah, but then if we just had it as like dense terrain, then it wouldn't benefit the Dark Elder as much, because it was like, well, if they hide behind it, then like the -1 wouldn't kick in and all this kind of stuff. So what we ended up doing is applying our own traits to it, so that it was dense terrain and soft cover. So what that meant was that yes, the Dark Elder only got a -1 for it, which isn't great, because Venoms get -1 and they got lightning fast reflexes. But then they also we made it soft cover, so if the Dark Elder whiz up to it and get inside it, which they could turn 1, then they get +1 to their save. So it's nice and balanced. So it means that the Dark Elder aren't going to get an unchallenged charge against the Guard, but they will have some resistance to just getting table wiped, but from just unrelenting Guard firepower on an open field, which actually worked out really well. If you go and watch it, Johnny was still a bit hesitant and thought it wouldn't favour him, but it actually turned out to be the perfect blend. So that's my first thing about obscuring terrain, which is I don't like it. I think obscuring terrain punishes, it's totally line of sight blocking, and if you have a big bit in the middle of the board, there's nothing you can do about it. It's really difficult. I think if you were thinking of using obscuring terrain on the battlefield, a better way of doing it is having dense cover and soft cover as a middle bit, which means if someone can get up that terrain, they can happily get loads of, have a -1 and be durable. I think that's a really good way of doing it. So that would be my first, that was my first bit of feedback, and feeding into the whole, the game is not quicker. We were looking at the preset Games Workshop terrain traits, and there was so much we were having to remember, and it was just, it's real. I think they'll be okay to balance it out and not to be a total salt miner. I think once you've played a few games of 9th, you can get to grips with the more complicated terrain traits. But starting off, I would not use them, because there are a lot of subtle. You're already having to learn so much with the missions. So I'd either do what Winter's SEO did and have a simple mission with complicated terrain rules, or do what we did, which is have a complicated mission but with simple terrain rules. That's how I would do it. They've kind of like double dipped with complicated missions and complicated terrain rules. It's a big barrier to entry. I'm not saying the game is impossible to learn, not at all. I'm just saying it's a barrier to entry. And as I said in that video, like 8th edition was just the free love edition. It was super easy to pick up. Loads of people got back into the game because it was super easy to learn and it was just fun. And I think the problem with 9th is that it's going to be super complicated. At first, I think it's got a steep learning curve, then it plateaus out. So that would be my first bit of first impressions. So the second thing I want to talk about is the matchup itself. So I was pleasantly surprised with the result of the game, even though I lost. Okay, now I know a lot of you will be surprised by that, but I was pleasantly surprised by it because in 8th edition, if that had been those two armies facing up against each other, I have no doubt I would have been creamed in terms of just being killed. Because what Johnny could do is he could fly in with his bikes, tie me up for my phase, so I have reduced firepower. Because what he can do is he can move forward, shoot me up, charge me. That way, when it comes to my turn, I have to fall back, which means I have reduced firepower. And then in his turn, he can fall back and shoot me, no penalty. That was 8th edition. 9th edition, his bikes fly up, they get into combat with me, and then they're like, well, we're kind of stuck here. I mean, with one squad, he can fall back and shoot and charge, but that's one squad. That's 9 out of 27. That's not great. It's not army wide anymore. So whilst he was raging and saying it was really bad, for a matchup, for that matchup, it was good. It made the game much more balanced. So I personally agree with it. I do think that it does mean that his army is going to struggle. It's it's gone from top tournament to like maybe middle, to be fair. Yeah, and it was also nice that I was able to take a fluffy army, which my Mordian 50th Rifles is fluffy. I've got Ogrins, not just Bulgrins. I've got bolters and random upgrades across all the squads. All the officers have got a bit of equipment. I take a little bit of everything. I don't take 3 company commanders. I balance it out by taking 2 and 2 of company commanders and Lord Commissars and stuff like that. So I thought it was really good that matchup was much closer than I thought it would have been. So that I think is a good thing. And that's just a reflection of the core rules. I think it's really good. Regarding the cap on minuses to hit, I think that played a part as well. Yeah, it was a bit silly when I was able to move with a missile launcher and shoot at a flying plane and suffer no additional penalty, but it meant I had a chance of shooting those planes down. And if I didn't have that, missile launcher, if I didn't have that cap, then it would have been, I wouldn't have shot his planes down. I wouldn't have done. So I think it is good. I think it is right. Having a cap at -1 is right. It means that those armies which really get stuffed by minus to hit modifiers actually have a chance to not be stuffed by them. So I think it is good. So the last thing I want to say is the last thing I want to say about the edition in general is Guard versus Secondaries. Now we'll get into this, like I said, more in the next video, but I think that Guard are really going to struggle with secondary objectives, not scoring them but giving them away. And I also think it's a bit of a myth what people said about board control. Okay, so in that game, if you go and watch it, the Foot Guard army kind of dominates the field of battle in terms of board control. I'm talking, Foot Guard dominated Dark Elder on board control. Dark Elder bikes. That's impressive. Like, not to blow my own trumpet, but that I did in theory what the internet, what the YouTube playtesters, like, you know, Tabletop Tactics and that lot have said. You know, I had the board control. Never held less than 3 objectives. I often held more than my opponent. But the problem with board control is, if for it to be successful, for it to matter, you have to absolutely dominate in board control. Having a bit more board control doesn't quite cut it. And you might be like, why is that? Well, let me tell you why. So, it comes down to the cap on primary victory points, and also how easy it is to score primary victory points. So basically you can only ever have 45 primary points, mission points. That means that's points for holding objectives. So the way it works, if you hold one objective, you get 5 points. If you hold 2 objectives, you get 10 points. And if you hold more objectives, not 3, just more, then you get 15 points. That sounds really good. You know, sit on those objectives all game, rack up 60 points. Well, you can't. Because even if you control 3 more victory points than your opponent every single turn of the game, you still cap out at 45. But for your opponent, all they have to do is hold 2 objectives, and they almost max it out. They get 40 points. And when you're playing a 6 objective board, that's not hard to do at all. That's not hard to do in the slightest. If you hold, if you hold 2 objectives out of 6, you can literally castle up on 2. I mean, think about if this was Marines. If that was a Marine army, you could just take 2 mini castles, of hyper durable Primaris armies, sit on 2 objectival games and sit on 2 objectives the whole game. You only miss out on 5 primary victory points, and your opponent never shifts you off. I mean, that's kind of crazy in comparison to someone else who's controlling double your objectives, but they only get 5 more points for doing that. Even if they hold double your even if one player holds twice the number of objectives that the other player holds for the entire game in a 6 objective mission, they only get 5 bonus points for doing that. That's stupid. The only way in a 6 objective mission that you can dominate your opponent and make them struggle is to make sure they only hold 1 objective. But that's mad. That means you have to hold or contest 5 out of 6 objectives. I mean, that's just like, what, 73%? It must be more than that. It's a lot. Is it like 70? Is it like 84% of the objectives or something? You've got to control 5 out of 6 objectives. And that's the only way you stop your opponent from basically almost matching you in primary, because that way they're only scoring 5 victory points a turn, which means they max out at 20. But even then, what's mad is, like, if you get max at 45, you get max primary. If you stop your opponent for 2 turns. If your opponent controls 1 objective for 2 turns, and then then they hold 2, you manage to dominate them for a bit, but then they manage to hold 2 more going forward, they still get 30 points. It's not that far behind. And if they manage to, all they have to do is, like I said, hold 2 objectives for the whole game. It's not that hard to do, especially in a 6-point objective mission. I think in a 4-point objective mission, holding 3 objectives is really doable. I think Guard could really dominate in 4 objective missions, because all you have to do is be like 60 men at one objective, 60 men at another objective, 60 men on my home objective, and the opponent's stuck on 1 the whole game. I think that'll do it. I think that's a good way of doing it. But yeah, 6 objective missions. Primary mission points are a trap. Anyway, I'm not going to labour that anymore, but you can see why board control, unless you have it to such an extreme extent in a 6 objective primary mission, it just doesn't matter. If you both just hold 2 objectives and sack off 2, and contest 2, you both get the same amount of points. So then it comes down to secondaries, which is what I was saying, like Guard get buggered on secondary objectives, because, this is the difficult bit. So if you take a Guard, the problem with secondaries and Guard comes down to one objective, which is thin their ranks. Thin their ranks works basically for every 10 wounds that you do, you get a victory point. So specifically how it works: if you kill an enemy model which has less than 10 wounds, so 1 to 9 wounds, if you kill an enemy model like a guardsman, you get a tally. If you kill a model that's got 10 or more wounds, like a Lehman Russ, you get 10 tallies. So you add all that up, all your tallies up, and then you divide it by 10 at the end, and that's your that's the number of victory points you get. So, for example, if you were to fight 100 Guard infantry and 5 Lehman Russes, and you wiped it all out, you would have 100 single tallies for the 100 Guardsmen, and then you'd have 10 tallies for each Lehman Russ, which would be 50, so therefore it comes 150, divide it by 10, 15 points. Okay, so the problem is that, so thin their ranks is like, oh well, it's not too bad, but then what you have to understand, someone has to wipe out all that to just max out one objective. Well, no, they don't, because the problem is that thin their ranks is in a different category, which means you can pick it, to all the killing ones, which means you can pick bring it down and thin their ranks, which totally screws Guard, because that means for each Lehman Russ or Lehman Russ tank commander that the enemy kills, they get 4 secondary points, because they'd get 3 for bring it down, because it's a vehicle with more than 11 wounds, and they get 1 for thin their ranks. So if you're looking at like a typical Guard army, which is going to have, 3 tank commanders, 3, at least 6 vehicles, maybe more. I mean, Guard armies can easily put down 3 tank commanders, 3 hellhounds, and a couple of chimeras. It's not even that hard. But let's just say you average out at like 7 vehicles as a Guard player. A mixture of light, medium, and heavy vehicles. That means that your opponent kills 5 out of 7 of your vehicles, and he maxes out big game, and then he also gets 5 points for thin the ranks, and then all he has to do is kill the 60 guardsmen you've got in your battalion. He's got 11. So even though you've taken a mixed army, your opponent has still scored the majority of the points that they need for the anti-horde one and thin their ranks. Thin their ranks is totally busted, and it really just needs to say you only get it for killing infantry. You don't get it for killing monsters and vehicles, because at the moment it is totally punishing to not only Guard but to all hybrid lists, but especially hybrid lists and mechanized, especially Guard and especially mechanized and tank lists. I mean, think about this. Imagine you're facing a pure mechanized Guard army. It's got 12 vehicles. That's 12 thin the rank points for killing vehicles. That's not anti-horde. That's killing vehicles. So so thin the ranks is really, really bad. So the problem with guard is that you don't have any problem with scoring primary, and you've not really got any problem with scoring secondaries either. You do all right. I got 79 out of. So I got, if you include painting score, I got 89 out of 100 victory points. That's a huge high scoring game. That's a huge high scoring game. But my opponent, because he was able to max out assassinate, because I'll get to assassinate in a moment. Because he was able to max out assassinate and thin the ranks, my opponent was able to max out his secondaries super easily. My opponent only dropped 5 victory points, and at the end, both of us only. This is the way to sum it up. At the end, my opponent and I both had 4 models left. He had a single witch, a plane, a venom, and Drozar. That's all he had left. I had company commander, a squad of dudes, and a Lord Commissar, a junior officer, and a massive ordnance. So pretty similar. But because of the way that the secondaries work, my opponent was able to pretty much max out his secondaries, but I wasn't able to max out mine. And even if I had, this is the crazy thing, even if I had managed to max out my secondaries, I still, that were available, so 10 points for bringing it down because my opponent had 5 vehicles, and so that would have been an additional 4 points for me, and also got an extra couple for engaging all fronts. I would have only got an additional 6 points, and my opponent, which would have been, I would have at best been able to get like maybe a draw at best, so I would have lost by like a couple of points. So it's just no, because I did max engage on all fronts. Yeah, I did max engage on all fronts. I'm pretty sure. So even if I had maxed all my secondaries, I still wouldn't have been able to beat him. Like, that's mad. I got every available point I could score from my opponent's army, but because of the way the 2 army compositions were, I couldn't physically win. I mean, that's mad, isn't it, when you think about it? So, I think with guard, the key, and we'll get into this again in the later video, but I think that with guard, the key is you're going to have to learn which secondaries you're willing to give up and how you can protect yourself against giving up other secondaries. Okay, so that's my overall impression of 9th. That's my first impression of 9th. It isn't quicker. The terrain rules are a bit complicated, and I think guard are kind of buggered. Now, I do feel like I've been moaning a lot, so I'm gonna hopefully not have scared loads of people away. I am going to say that based on the second game I had with the Black Templars and the Blood Angels, I started to get 9th a bit more. So with the Guard and Dark Elder one was a tough one because it was my first game. I was learning Johnny's army. I was learning 9th. My brain was melting. I made a lot of mistakes in that battle. Looking back on it, I made several tactical errors. So, you know what, I'll go over the tactical errors first, and then I'll move on to the second battle, and I'll just do that one quicker, because it's just Black Templars and Blood Angels. So, tactical errors in that battle. My Bulgrins were tied up in combo, but my Ogrin and my Priest wasn't. And I was like, well, what I want to do is shoot stuff. So, what happened, sorry, on the right flank, from my perspective, there was one Ogrin and one Priest which had survived the onslaught of 2 bike squads, and I could have fallen back with them, but I didn't. I decided what I wanted to do was instead move my infantry up, rapid fire the stuff that was behind the combat, like the Venoms and the Witches and the Planes, and then charge the bikes. In hindsight, that was splitting. That was wrong. What I should have done, and what I should have done is fallen back and just blasted the bikes with everything I had, and then charged in and finished them off. Now, the reason I should have done that is because what ended up happening is I killed some of the backfield stuff, but a lot of it was behind the dense terrain, so I didn't kill as much as I wanted to. And then I got stuck in a protracted combat with the bikes. And whilst it was super cool doing a proper bayonet charge and just, you know, killing the bikes through pure attrition, it meant that I was stuck in combat for a long time. And actually, I didn't want to be stuck in combat. And if I hadn't been stuck in combat like that, what would have happened is I could have cleared those bikes nice and easily. Then that would have been that flank sorted, nice and easily done. And then I would have been able to move on to 5 out of 6 objectives and denied my opponent lots and lots of primary victory points. That's what I should have done. So that was my big tactical mistake there. It was very cool, and Johnny even said, like, you know, mad respect for not just falling out of combat and charging and shooting. And I was like, well, I want to do a bayonet charge. He was like, well, mad respect for the bayonet charge. So it was a fun, fluffy thing to do, but tactically it wasn't the right thing to do. Honestly, I was just rusty. I didn't even think about falling back. I was just like, oh, I'll just charge in. So that was a big tactical mistake on my end. Second one was the veterans. I threw them in. So the first, I'd misplayed both my veteran squads, which was a shame because it meant that the majority of my plasma was was killed. So the first veteran squad that started off on the field, I forgot to use the new stratagem to give them a -1 to hit. Would that have made them survive? Maybe not, but it would have meant that Johnny would have to put a lot more firepower into them. And the second veteran squad, I then threw away on the stronger flank. And instead of going after, like, the left-hand objective in near Johnny's deployment zone, I should have gone after the right-hand one, which only had, like, one witch defending it. Yeah, definitely should have gone after that other one instead. So, lessons learned there. I made 2 key tactical errors. I won't try not to do that again in the future. I was just so rusty on 40k. I mean, Johnny had both agreed we weren't going to be total tryhards. We were instead going to just play it as fluffy and just fun as possible. And even doing that, we were still getting really stressed out because we were having to learn so much. But not at each other, just stressed out, as in we were generally stressed because of the amount of learning we were having to do, the brain power. So, those are my tactical errors, though, and personally, I think that is what lost me the game. I don't think it is I don't think necessarily the 9th edition is bad for guard. I think those tactical errors lost me the game. I think, however, that that's that the learning curve for 9th is high. It is high, so I think try and learn from my mistakes. Watch my battle report. Treat it like if it's your own first battle. And if I was to give anyone any advice, if you're thinking of going to a tournament for 9th at some point, get loads of battles under your belt first. Don't go in there fresh because you'll die. Your brain will melt. So yeah, like 9th edition does have its problems, but I wouldn't blame 9th edition for losing me that game. I made some tactical errors. I do think that 9th edition does favour certain factions, but I could have pulled it back. So that was that battle. Positive things are overall, I've said, like, the matchup was really, went much better. So I think it was really good. So that was that game. That was my, make sure, that's the lessons learned. I think the lessons that I learned in my first game, I took into my second game. And, the second game was a lot more enjoyable because I already had 9th edition kind of nailed down at that point. And I was also playing an army that I was familiar with, my Black Templars, and I was also playing against an army that I was really familiar with, which was the Blood Angels. And also there's just a lot less models involved, so that was good. With the second game, I managed to claw a draw. But when we worked the points out with the points reveals, turned out that I actually had 100 less points than Johnny. So Johnny was like, "Well, just have it as a minor victory for you." Then I was like, "Fair enough." So we both got a minor victory that weekend. Now, what happened in that is basically, I what caused me to get the draw was I took a squad of 5 Terminators, deployed them into the enemy deployment zone like turn 2, and then just maxed out the fix the teleporter Homer strategy. Not stratagem, I meant secondary objective. So what I learnt with the second mission is I took a squad of 5 Terminators, like a 200-point unit, and I just deep struck them, and they didn't do any shooting all game. But what allowed me to get the draw / minor victory was that they just maxed out one unit, just 200 points, just maxed out one of my secondaries. And so what I realised with 9th edition and the way that you win it, the way that you do wear 9th edition, is you build a list that doesn't give away a lot of secondary points. It's not obvious what to pick against you. So, for example, you don't want to pick, guard. It's obvious to pick thin their ranks, or because you've got a lot of infantry and tanks, or bring it down because you've got a lot of vehicles, or assassinate because you've got a lot of support characters. With guard, it's really easy to just look at the enemy army and just go, right, I'll pick those 2. That's an easy 30 points for me to get. Whereas with like Black Templars, it was like, right, Johnny looked at my arm and was like, I've no idea really what to pick against you. And when it was that scenario, both sides only got 50 points. And I sacrificed a 200-point unit to do no damage all game, but it scored me 15 points, which is almost 33% of my points. So, and I realised, and what I really enjoyed was the cinematic feeling of these the Black Templars just fighting tooth and nail to delay the Blood Angels as long as possible, whilst another unit of Terminators drop in and fix teleporter home, and then like the Black Templars are like, right, we've got the teleporter home. Narratively, we're going to start bringing in loads and loads of reinforcements. The Blood Angels are like, well, we've smashed these Black Templars, but we're not going to be able to hold this ground against all these reinforcements that are coming in. So narratively, that battle made a lot of sense. It was really rewarding and really fun. And it was really, really good. And it was balanced. Considering I was 100 points down, it was balanced. So I think, and the interesting thing about Black Templars is a lot of people will tell you that Black Templars aren't as good as Blood Angels. I think Black Templars are just as good as Blood Angels. They just play a bit differently, and they're not as obviously powerful, but they've got a lot of good things going on for them. But that's another video later this week. I'm going to do a bit of a Black Templar, my thoughts on Black Templars versus Blood Angels, which trait you to pick. So going forward, what would I take away from this after action report? What would I learn from my battles? Firstly, don't lose sight of the objectives. When it comes to primary, it's more important to deny your opponent primary points than worrying about scoring your own primary points. If you just do normal stuff, you'll score max primary, but your opponent, you have to try and stop him from scoring max primary. So that's what I would say when it comes to guard. You're not going to struggle to earn points. The big thing with guard is stopping your opponent from getting their points, either via secondaries or just mobbing them on primaries. I would also say the great thing about so lesson learned, I think after playing 10 games of 9th, the complication and the rules slow down won't be a problem anymore. So that's a positive thing, I'd say. I think my guard army will get a lot more distilled, and I think that I'll get much better at picking my secondaries. And, the way I stop my opponent from getting secondaries off me. And the positive thing I would say is that there has the potential for some really awesome cinematic moments. Really awesome. I do think the game potentially favours elite infantry, but I also think, like I said before the reveals, I think if you go pure infantry guard, it's so not meta, it goes around the curve and becomes super meta, and it might be very, very. I think positive note. I think that pure infantry guard is potentially still the strongest way of running them. So for all those people that were worried about it, I wouldn't worry about it. I'm going to be taking pure infantry guards still going forward. I'm not painting up those tanks like I thought I was going to. Tanks are a bit of a trap. I'm going pure guard all the way. Pure infantry all the way. But if you want to know more about why I'm going to do that, watch tomorrow's video. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy this video. Put lots of comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the battle report. Give me feedback on the camera. I know I was a bit shaky. Like I said, super rusty. Let me know what you thought I could have done better. I really want to get that tactical feedback. Hope you enjoyed it. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.